welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Keep it up please, it's very much appreciated. Firstly, an apology before we start this week's episode of the show. I was away for a few days this week, and I haven't really done my research on the independent bottling company we're looking at today particularly well, so just bear with me if I'm a little bit vague with regards to the sort of the history and makeup of the company. Basically a few weeks ago I received an email from a company called Global Whisky Ltd from Lewis, basically saying, we're an independent bottling company, would you like some samples? And I thought, would I like some samples? Well, does the Pope you know what in the wood? And lo and behold, a load of samples turned up, 11 in actual fact. I've obviously selected 6 to review today. So unfortunately, like I said, I don't really know a huge amount about Global Whisky Ltd. From what I've managed, I should have spoken to Lewis a bit more length, but unfortunately I just didn't have the opportunity to do so. And as far as I can figure out, the company was founded in 2017, and I'm guessing founded as a brokerage company. Certainly that appears to be part of their raison d'etre, I suppose, and now have decided to release a series of bottlings under their own labels, or labels I should say. I mean, because this lot don't seem to be mucking about. I mean, they're bottled, well, I mean, I think the list is about 18 bottlings, so you know, they're sort of looking to make a bit of a splash, and so they've got 3, I suppose, labels for want of a better word. The first is called Concept 8, which, as the name suggests, is small batches of 8-year-old whiskies. Currently, I think there's 4 releases, all retailing around about the sort of £30 mark. The second label is called the Red Cask Company, which is solely bottling single cask sherry matured whiskies, and I think there's 1 release so far in that particular range. And then the range we're looking at today, which is called Auld Goonsy's Malt. Now, it's a bit boutique-y whiskey, I think. You know, they've created this kind of character, Auld Goonsy, who's supposedly an old-timer in the whiskey industry, who's tapping up his mates for a few casks and bottling them, and, you know, it's a bit kind of... some people are going to love it, you know, the whole kind of idea and all that kind of stuff. I personally find them a little bit, I wouldn't say cringeworthy. I don't think it's necessary to sort of, well, you make up your own mind whether you kind of like these fictitious backstories or not. And personally, I would have just liked to see them bottled as, you know, this is a single cask bottling range, you know. But anyway, that is neither here nor there really at the end of the day, because as I always say, it's all about the juice in the bottle. And I think there's about 15 casks that they've bottled in this Auld Goonsy's range, of which I think they sent me 11 samples, and I've whittled it down to 6. So hopefully they should be really intriguing, and like I said, they're obviously looking to make a bit of a splash. And well, I mean, if you're going to bottle sort of this many casks, I mean, I think from the early email, they're bottling somewhere in the region of about 40 odd casks. I mean, that's a huge amount of money by anyone's standards. I mean, you know, so anyway, like I said, they said, do you want to taste some samples? And I'm thinking, let's have a look at them. So yeah, so it's the Auld Goonsy's range, and as per usual, any comments I do make are wholly my own and have no bearing or relevance to the company that I work for. So, not really a great deal else to say, because I don't really know an awful lot about the company, like I said. But let's just have a look at what we're going to be looking at today, then, shall we? Right, okay, so we're going to kick off with a 12-year-old Linkwood, bottled at 52%. It's a single American oak hoggy, 303023, distilled in July of 2008 and bottled in 2021, so should be interesting. Bottling number 2 is an 11-year-old Dailuaine, bottled at 49%. Again, a single bourbon hoggy, 310721, distilled in July of 2009 and again bottled this year, as they all are. Then we're going to jump up the age statement. The next one we're going to be looking at is a 15-year-old Bruichladdich bourbon barrel. Hallelujah. Oh, you know, I'm looking forward to tasting that. So this is, like I said, a 15-year-old bottled at 50%. Bourbon barrel number 722, distilled in June of 2006 and again bottled this year. Then we're going to move on to a sherried one. Now, unfortunately, as I've got the black glass, you can't actually see what the colour is like, but believe you me, it is pretty light. You wouldn't have thought it was sherry matured, judging by the colour of it. So this is a 13-year-old Teaninich, sherry butt number 709849, bottled at 57.5%, distilled in June of 2008 and bottled this year. Then we're going to move on to a 10-year-old Lochindaal. Now, for those of you that don't know what Lochindaal is, it's a spirit that was distilled at Bruichladdich. I think they distilled it on 2 occasions, 2007 and 2010. Peated to 50 parts per million. Now, I don't know why they did this, because as far as I'm aware, the distillery have never released it. And well, it would be confusing, because I mean, you've obviously got the unpeated Bruichladdich, and then you've got obviously Port Charlotte at 40 parts per million, and then Ardmore at 100 and something odd. So it would kind of, you know, be a bit confusing. It would be harking back to the old Murray McDavid days of Bruichladdich, when there was a sort of a list about yay long of different bottlings. So it appears that the Lochindaal only has been sold to the independents, and I have seen it cropping up in a few lists. So this is again first fill bourbon barrel, 4359, distilled in December of 2010, bottled in 2021. So, like I said, it should be interesting, you know. Yeah. And then the final bottling of the day is a 12-year-old Ardmore. So again, bottled at 50%. Aged in a peated Islay barrel, number 706110. Now, I have come across Ardmore that has, you know, been aged in ex-peated Islay casks, and yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it's already pretty heavily peated to start off with, so, you know, so it could be intriguing, could be peat overkill, you never know. So distilled in November of 2008 and bottled this year, and that will be the one that we're finishing on, because it's always fun to finish with a bit of peat, isn't it? So so yeah, I think sort of intriguing range, some interesting casks that have that they've either got their hands on or, you know, bottled. So don't really think there's a great deal else to say, apart from let's start with the Linkwood. Right, okay, so let's see what the Linkwood gives us on the nose then, shall we? Oh, that's a lovely nose. Fragrant, aromatic, barley, crunchy barley, gristy barley, white fruit, lemon. It's a bit of an alcohol prickle, but it's kind of adding to that sort of lovely freshness. It's young, it's exuberant. But again, the alcohol is kind of sort of just keeping it in check a little bit. A little bit of oak, not a huge amount. Yeah, I mean, that's a lovely Linkwood. It's kind of, I mean, I've come across more fruitier Linkwoods, I've come across more grassier Linkwoods, and this is kind of like, I would say, almost, to me, pretty much textbook Linkwood. Sort of lots of barley, a little bit of oak. Obviously the alcohol is kind of keeping some of that sort of, you know, richness and creaminess under control. Now this would hit the shelves, or should we say the you know, around about sort of 52 to sort of 55ish kind of quid, which is about right these days for an independent 12-year-old. Anyway, let's see what that's like. Young, robust, fuller, less citric, less barley, more mash tunny, more cereally. But there's no faints, there's no off notes. It is young. The finish is quite masked. There's not a lot going on beyond the alcohol. But Bit of citrus, bit of spice, bit of oak. I mean, it's a lovely whiskey. I think it's one of these ones that really is going to need a little drop of water, so we are going to put a reasonable splosh in, because like I said, it is quite masked. Oh yeah, that really has done the job. Wonderfully fruity now, aromatic, Alsatian white fruits, apricot, peach. Not quite tropical, it's just sort of verging on the tropical, but that's just gorgeous. It is a lovely summery and all that. Well, ideal for this time of the year, considering that the weather we're having, certainly here in the UK in September. Very unusual, still quite summery. So let's see what pass on now. Juicy, soft, absolutely beautiful, spot on. Again, plenty of fruit, a little bit of a citric edge, a little bit of a sort of a gristly barley edge. It's got a really lovely natural character to it. It's not sort of overblown. It's just treading the right line between fruity and restrained, and youthfulness. I mean, that is just an absolutely wonderful cask. Brilliant one to start with, I think. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Dailuaine. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Full, rich, meaty, as you would expect from Dailuaine. I think I'm right in saying that Dailuaine does have worm tubs. I'm pretty certain it does. And the thing is with Dailuaine, it can be really hit and miss. Now, this I think is actually pretty good. It's got buckets of character, touch of sort of apple, apricot, bit more oak character. It's got that sort of warm vanilla kind of notes happening, a little bit of spice, but it really is quite rich, almost verging on the breadiness, you know, sort of not quite sort of Ben Nevis-y breadiness, but and it's not sort of, when I say meaty, it's not sort of cooked meat or meat smells. It's got that kind of inference, shall we say, of meatiness, that richness. That is really quite impressive. Let's see what it pass on. Again, rich, full, barley, slightly meaty, apricot, bit of gristly barley, bit of tannin, a little bit of spice, certainly on the finish, lovely spiciness on the finish. My tongue is almost tingling, combination of the alcohol and the spice. A little bit of citrus as well, so that the edge of your tongue is starting to water. I mean, that is just lovely. I mean, you know, like I said, Dailuaine is very, very hit and miss and can be a bit maligned, but when it's good, you know, it is just absolutely wonderful. It has that, like I said, that richness of character, that sort of meatiness, that fullness, and I'm not going to bother with any water because I don't think it really needs it, but, you know, that's pretty impressive. So. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 15-year-old Bruichladdich. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. Oh, incidentally, before I do, the Dailuaine would retail in around the same sort of price as the Linkwood, so between 52 and sort of 55, which again, I don't think is too bad. Oh, it's been such a long time. It really has. Classic Bruichladdich. It's not that it's more in the sort of like the richer, maltier end of the Bruichladdich spectrum. There is some salt. There's some honeysuckle. It's maybe not quite so floral as I remember older sort of distillery bottlings of the 15-year-old. Although in saying that, I think the old 15-year-old had a bit of sherry in it. This is obviously a single bourbon barrel. A little bit of wax, marzipan, almond. There's a touch of darker fruit coming through. I mean, oh my God, that's stunning. That's stunning. I mean, it's 142 to about 145 quid, which you might think, oh, that's a bit steep for a 15-year-old, but you know, this is worth every penny. I mean, it's just like, you can't get hold of this anymore. You know, you'll never see the distillery releasing an American oak aged 15-year-old ever again. It's all too much bloody wine casks and stuff, you know, which is not doing any disrespect to Bruichladdich, but I mean, this is just divine. It's just stunning. It's stuff I just sort of sit here and sniff all day, but if I did, it would be a really boring episode of the show, wouldn't it? I'd just be going, oh. Anyway, that's what the palate's like. Again, Bruichladdich had its robust and malty character. Salt, bit of honey, little bit of honeysuckle, sweet apricot, marzipan, slightly oily marzipan, a little bit of peach, just that suggestion of smoke, a little bit of dried fruit, a little bit of oxidation. Vanilla, spice, tongue tingling finish, it has to be said. I mean, that's obviously the alcohol. A little bit of an earthiness on the aftertaste. I mean, that is stunning whiskey, and it just goes to show how good the spirit that comes off the stills at Bruichladdich is, you know. But like I said, you know, when it's masked by all the bloody wine casks, you just don't see the purity of the spirit, and that is what I really miss from Bruichladdich, from the distillery bottlings anyway, is that purity of character. Going to put a little drop of water with it. I don't think it really needed it, but I'm just going to see what it does to it. It's emphasised the slightly earthiness. There's a little bit more rich fruit, a little bit more salt possibly. It's kind of brought forward the oak a little bit more. Not quite so floral now, still quite malty. I mean, it's still absolutely gorgeous. I think I prefer it with neat, personally. It's just bringing the oak forward that little bit too much. But, let's see what I can't say. Big, rich, juicy, mouth-filling. A little bit simpler now with the water. There's a bit of bitter spice, salt, peat. I mean, that's still a stunning mouthful, it has to be said, stunningly good. Personally prefer it without water, and shut up! Sorry about that. Right, where was I? Anyway, damn, that was good.
We have lost everything.
Right, okay, right. Dog dealt with. And not Byron. That was my partner's daughter's dog, which we have here at the moment, and it can be a little bit excitable. Anyway, right. Let's move on to the next whiskey. Like I said, you can't really see the colour, and you'll have to take my word for the fact that it's not particularly dark. So, 13-year-old Teaninich, aged in sherry butt. Let's see what those gives on this end, shall we? Yeah, it's got quite a sherry character. It's grapey. It's a lighter sort of dried citrus, sultana sort of dried fruit. A little bit of oxidised apple, honeysuckle, gooseberry. Touch of rose petal, but it's not sort of marry rose petal. It's kind of clean rose petal, so it's kind of showing its youth. What I like about it is it has that sort of almost fino-y sort of grapiness to it, rather than that dense sort of raisinated Oloroso character. I mean, I don't know what the cherry butt itself actually was. I mean, you know, they might not know what it was either. But it certainly does does kind of come across as a Fino rather than an Oloroso. It certainly doesn't have the sort of nuttiness of a Manzanilla, for example. And so yeah, I kind of quite like this. It's again, it's giving you a bit of sherry character, but it's not blasting you with sherry. You know, it's a little bit different, which is what I'm always looking for. Alright, let's see what passes on. Gristy. It's got that sort of gristy kind of ground flowery kind of sort of mouthfeel. Dried grape, oxidised fruit. Again, it just has that sort of Fino-y sort of character. I don't get a kind of a flory kind of note, but I certainly get lighter oxidised fruit. Like I said, sultana, dried citrus. There's a little bit of spice. There's some vanilla. Yeah, there's a bit of alcohol. It just nips a little bit, it masks a little bit, but it makes your mouth water. Gonna put a little drop of water with it and just see what that does to it. Yeah, I mean, even so, I kind of quite like this. I mean, it's again 58 to sort of 60 quid, so a little bit more expensive than say the Linkwood and the Dailuaine. But I'd be quite happy with paying that for this, because like I said, it's not a huge Oloroso monster. It's kind of balanced. Right, okay, so water has kind of knocked back the sherry notes a little bit, as it often has a tendency to do. It's a little bit more floral, a little bit more barley, still a bit grapey, a little bit sweeter as well, a bit oilier possibly. I mean, Teaninich, more often than not, does tend to be sort of classically spey, you know, sort of crisp green fruits, that kind of thing. Can be a bit simple. But this has got a really nice sweetness to it now. It's sort of subtle, not quite honeyed sweetness, but sort of dried fruit sweetness. Let's see what the palate gives us now. A little fresher, but still quite oily, still quite full. Less of that youthfulness, and I'm now going to go and strangle that bloody dog. Okay, apologies again. Obviously, there was no dogs were strangled. It was a metaphorical strangle. It was more a case of go and lay down with a very gruff voice, which seems to have done the job. They're shut up now, thankfully. Anyway, right, okay, yeah. So yeah, that was a pretty good Teaninich, I think. So let's move on to the Lochindaal. I haven't actually tasted very many bottlings of Lochindaal, so always kind of intrigued. Anyway, let's see when those get sent, shall we? Oh dear me, God, that's intense. That's intense in a good way. I mean, it's gritty, it's peaty, it's got that kind of almost kind of French tannin kind of notes. It's really sort of grippy. Vanilla, citrus, banana, apricot, yeah, apricot, marzipan, touch of malt, barley, more salt. I mean, ooh. I mean, this is, I mean, I was expecting possibly a bit more peat. I mean, it's got a good dollop of peat, that sort of slightly earthy, maybe slightly manure-y rather than sort of medicinal peat. But again, it's just stunningly balanced. I mean, this is, for a 10-year-old, not cheap as you would expect, and it's a bit of a rarity. So this is between 168 and 170 something quid a bottle. So yes, you're going to go, what, for a 10-year-old? But oh, what a 10-year-old! That's stunning. I mean, absolutely stunning. I mean, it's just so balanced. Like I said, 50 parts per million. You expect sort of like, you know, a face full of peat, but you don't get that. It's got that. It's just got such a sublime balance of distillery character, peat, oak. Let's see what the parts are. It is quite oaky. Again, it has that sort of almost French oak feel, that sort of gritty kind of tannic note. There's some apricot, honeysuckle again, malt, juicy, slightly oxidised fruit. The peat again is quite subtle. It kind of comes through on the mid palate. It's earthy, it's slightly manure-y. There's a touch of toffee, citrus. It's a little masked on the finish. I mean, it is it's 50%. Yeah, okay. A little bit of darker fruit on the finish. More malt, touch of salt, a little bit of earth. I mean, that is a stunning bottling. I mean, that really is very, very impressive, it has to be said. Let's do a little bit of water and see what that does to it. But either way, I mean, damn good cask. Little bit more sort of citrus coming through now, white fruit, lemon, a little bit more salt, a little bit less oak, which is a good thing. Although, like I said, it wasn't exactly sort of an overt vanilla monster. It was, like I said, more tight, more tannic, almost kind of French oak in character. Really vibrant, some nuttiness, a little bit less peat, but it's got a bit more of a sort of like a malty sweetness happening. Again, really, really nice. Let's see what it palate's like. Again, less oak, more youthful spirit, but not overly youthful. It's still got that sort of lovely apricot, honeysuckle, malt, quite a fishy finish in actual fact. It's got a sort of a pseudo-esque kind of springbank thing happening right on the finish. That's a good tasting note, isn't it? Pseudo-esque springbank thing happening in the finish. This is all kind of like, you know, stream of consciousness stuff, you know. This is normally some of the stuff that if I would write down, I might actually edit out sometimes. A little bit of cereal. Again, the oak is kind of quietened down. Oily, peaty, but not overly peaty. Just balanced, just stunning. I mean, absolutely stunning. I mean, you know, I don't know whether the company are exporting to markets other than the UK, but I can tell you what, a certain whiskey merchant will be having that one. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 12-year-old Ardmore. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Well, that's certainly no shrinking violet. That's primal, it's vegetal, it's cabbagey, it's sulphury, it's peppercorns, rose petal mar. It's kind of, it's kind of grabbing you by the sort of like the you know the whatsits and kind of I mean that I almost lost for words. I mean, it is just kind of primal is just such a great word for this whiskey. It is just kind of you know, screaming peat and sulphur and veg and cabbage, and you know what, it's actually quite appealing. I know you might find that really difficult to believe, but you know, it's kind of like, you know, it's yeah, there's not a lot of going on apart from all of that, but you know, ooh, and yeah, okay, it's 80 sort of 90 quid, and you want weird, you want intense, you got it. That's what the palate's like. Right, we've got a bit more of a straightforward palate actually. It kind of kicks off with more of the barley. It's richer, it's fuller. The peat is earthy, it's manure-y. I don't get any cabbage, I don't get any sulphur. It's quite astringent, there's herbal notes, there's kind of alcohol, there's a little bit of oak. It's raw, it's intense. it's a whole barrel of fun, it has to be said. You know, it's just like, you know, this is kind of the whiskey that you finish the evening on. It's kind of like, oh my god. Yeah, it is. It's a whole load of fun. It's great. It's just got so many, well, I wouldn't quite say faults. It's just, it is what it is at the end of the day. You know, it's kind of like, you know, some people may, you're going to either love that or you're going to hate it, basically. Let's put a little drop of water with it and see what that does to the spirit. Right, we had to kind of calm that nose down a little bit, it has to be said. There's less of that cabbagey kind of sulphuriness, and there's a little bit more vanilla, a little bit more barley, a little bit more sweetness. It's still pretty young, it's still pretty raw, and yeah, the cabbagey note is kind of still just there at the edge, but it's entertaining. You can't argue that it lacks character, because it's got character by the bucketful. Whether you like that character or not, of course, is open to debate. But let's see what the palate like now. A little bit more barley, a little bit more oak. Still quite astringent, still quite herbal. Grippy finish, little bit short, it has to be said, but you know, that is just such a wonderful fun whiskey. It's not the sort of whiskey you'd want to drink all of the time, but it's certainly a kind of shall we say, it's a talking point kind of whiskey, isn't it? And at the end of the day, that's what I want. I want whiskies that have personality, and you can't argue that that doesn't have personality. Right, okay, so let's quickly sum this up before the dogs start barking again. Right, so firstly, a big thank you to Lewis at the Global Whisky Company for kindly sending me the samples. Like I said, I had 11 samples, so I did have to whittle them down, and it was not necessarily removing what I thought were bad. I mean, there were a few kind of iffy bottlings, because at the end of the day, all independents are pretty much the same. Good bottlings, not so good bottlings, and I must admit I would prefer to, you know, review the good stuff at the end of the day, because, you know, life's too short for crap whiskey at the end of the day. And I'm digging that bloody hole again, aren't I? I'm saying that they bottled some crap. These were probably the 6 out of the 11 that really kind of floated my boat. And the Linkwood was absolutely lovely, classic kind of Linkwood, crunchy barley, really young, exuberant, a little bit of oak, yeah, really nicely balanced, good value for money in this day and age. And I thought, yeah, I kind of quite like that. The Dailuaine, again, you know, for the same reason, plenty of distillery character, you know, lovely depth to it, very, you know, meaty, full, classically Dailuaine, just one of the better Dailuaines that I have I've come across. And again, you know, I didn't think it was too bad value for money. Do I need to say anything about the 15-year-old Bruichladdich apart from, oh my god, that was absolutely stunning. Just Bruichladdich how I remember it from sort of, you know, 15 odd years ago. It was like kind of like a bit of a blast from the past, and it was kind of the stuff you just don't see anymore. The Teaninich, yeah, I kind of quite like that. Like I said, you know, yes, it's a sherried whiskey, not hugely sherried. Felt more Fino-y than sort of Oloroso to me, and that's the kind of sherried whiskey that I'm quite happy to sell to you guys. And again, you know, 60 odd quidish. Yeah, I'm kind of quite comfortable with that. Lochindaal, yeah, right, it's expensive, but yeah, if you can get hold of a bottle of Lochindaal, I'm guessing, I mean, admittedly single cask obviously have their variation, as we well know, but if the quality of this particular bottling is indicative of Lochindaal as a whole, then I mean, talking of Lochindaal, I remember that when I first started in the whiskey industry, sort of 20 odd years ago. The only official bottling of Bruichladdich was called Lochindaal, which is quite bizarre, black tube, and I wish I'd picked up a few of those back then, because they're probably going to go for they're going for a fortune now, I think. But anyway, that's by the by. And the Ardmore, well, I mean, like I said, it's certainly a talking point whiskey. I don't think it's bad. I mean, yeah, right, it has flaws, but those flaws are kind of endearing, I suppose. And you know, it's like a friend of mine once said to me, it's sort of like, you know, I get bored of perfect whiskies. I like whiskies that have flaws, because you can talk about them, and well, yeah, okay, you can argue that has flaws, but and yeah, right, you're going to have to pay a bit of money to experience those flaws, I suppose, which is, but you know, it is what it is at the end of the day. It's Ardmore. It's kind of, you know, not quite as funky as, say, Lochindaal, for example, but you know, it's certainly getting kind of to that direction, and certainly when you stick it in an ex-Islay cask, it certainly becomes quite funky. But anyway, well, I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. I've had a real blast, it has to be said, and it certainly looks like you know, Global Whisky Ltd are bottling some very, very fine whiskies, and you know, if they're available in your market, your area, then I would certainly look them up. Ignore the labelling and all the guff. Just forget all about that, and just sort of like, you know, buy a bottle of the Bruichladdich. Anyway, until next week, all I can say is good afternoon and good dramming.